Welcome along to the Yokomo Willspeed build series that I'm going to do. So I got a donor car from good friends of ours at SEMCS, which is Slough Electric Model Car Spares. They're a great Yokomo stockist, as well as doing Schumacher and all the other top line racing brands and accessories. So their website's great, and they ship next day, which is brilliant. So I've just had my donor car arrive from Sam and the guys there. So here it is. So we've got a Yokomo 3 here, which I'm going to turn into a Willspeed, which I'll show you in a minute, as I'm running Yokomo this season. So I've got a 3.1 and a four-wheel drive as well, YZ4SF, as I don't really do much four-wheel, so just got an older car just to as and when we do that. So yeah, here's the car. It needs a bit of love. It was sort of sold as a bit of a project car, so I knew what I was getting, but overall it's all there. So we've got the roll bars fitted, obviously front wing mount there. It's got some purple springs, which would be quite good for carpet racing. It's a standard car. It's got no option parts on it. As you can see, there's some of the hardware's gone a little rusty where it's probably been stored in a bit of a damp area, but we'll replace this with stainless hardware. Over to the back end, so really nice free gearbox, as you can see. So that's great. It's got a gear diff fitted, which is what I wanted anyway for my carpet car, and the rear roll bar fitted. I'll just go and grab the Willspeed and then show you what that looks like. Right, so here's the Yokomo RF2 Willspeed conversion. So this, I've had this on previous cars before, but I'm sort of building a dedicated indoor carpet car for the winter season, as that's now approaching. So this will get built onto the donor car, as you've seen. So yeah, here it is. So obviously gorgeous machined piece of aluminium, really, for the Yokomo. This one's slightly different. It's running on the back here. We've got a associated shock tower, which is 3mm lower than the standard one. Normally you just have the kind of ears coming off here, but this is a one-piece tower that's 3mm lower. If you want to do this, you basically just buy the tower and a B6 wing mount. It bolts up to the same lower rear shock mount as well. So yeah, and it's got all the machined idler gears in here and everything. So we'll get the donor car stripped down, cleaned up, and then we'll start the build up on the Willspeed chassis. So what I tend to do with rebuilding cars is normally whip the shocks off first, and then obviously check over the front ends for binding. So we'll lift the wishbones up and down, just make sure there's no binding and they're nice and free. And then we'll I normally take the front and rear ends off the car, then strip the chassis out. But obviously this time we're converting it to a Willspeed, so I'll just leave that in the spares box. And then I'll just work on the front end, get that fully stripped down, service, check what settings it's got on it. So we'll check the camber link settings, what the caster settings are, what steering plates it's got on it, you know, wheel hex, width, etc. And obviously follow that with a setup sheet as we put it back together. So this was a setup sheet from one of our team drivers for Willspeed. So this is Victor in Norway, so he's a pretty handy driver. So this is his EOS setup that we're going to copy during the build for the Willspeed version, and his car went really well at the EOS in Germany, so we'll give this a whiz and see what it's like on my local carpet track. So anyhow, we'll get the tools out. I've got a couple there ready to rock and roll, and then we'll start getting these shocks unbolted and go from there. So that's the shocks unbolted. We'll service these and have these fully stripped down, which we'll do. I normally do that at the end of the build. So we'll check the O-ring, see if they need replacing, and check what pistons are in it, and refresh yours. But for now, we'll just set those aside. Now we've got the front end stripped, so we'll just quickly check this over and make sure the wishbones drop under their own weight. But they certainly do. Obviously, this has got a front roll bar connected, so we'll just unclip that. But that all seems quite free, which is good. So now we'll start pulling the front end away from the chassis. So that's all the bolts undone from the front end now. So this has just got the stock steel bulkhead, which is what we want. So now we'll just pull this all off from the chassis like so, and then we've got obviously the steering still connected here, so we'll have just to pull this block off and then slide this up carefully. I'll do that off camera, as there's a couple of little shims in there we don't want to lose from the steering rack, but that's basically the front end pulled off. And then we do need to use these triangular pieces on the Willspeed car. I know on the Cal 3.1 and the SO range of cars, this is all integrated into the side rails, which is a bit neater, but for the design of the Willspeed we just need to use these parts, so we'll take those off as well. that's the front end removed from the car now. So we've got all the parts we need. The Willspeed chassis comes with these little dimples there that lock into the lower bulkhead. So we'll just set that aside now. And there's the front end. So that's it all stripped off of the car. Like I say, there's those parts we need. There's the servo mounts. And now we'll totally strip this front end down. And like I say, check all the settings, make sure the hinge pins are all straight. So we'll roll those on a piece of glass to make sure they're flat. And then we'll get all this rusty hardware changed out for some nice stainless steel stuff. So right, let's crack on with that. So that's the front end all stripped down. I'm giving it a quick wipe over. What I normally do is just get an old paintbrush like this, bit of GT85 on the brush, and then just brush it over the plastic parts. It's got silicone in it, so it gives the sort of plastic parts a nice shine, as you can see. So just gonna grab the my nut and bolt box, which is just here, full of stainless steel fasteners, and then we'll just start removing these and then get these all replaced, then start building the front end back up. Good thing, checking this, the roll bar here was really tight, so I've just loosened those two little screws off on the back there, so that's swinging freely, as you can see. So we'll I'll do the hardware off camera, and then I'll show you once the front end's all built back up. So we've just got the stainless hardware into the shock tower there, but I was just having a look at these, and as you can see on camera, we have a rather bent right hand shock mounting bolt. I normally just keep these in steel, as they're a bit stronger than the stainless ones. So in sort of high stress areas, I tend to use the steel bolts rather than the stainless ones. So we'll just swap that bent one out for a straight one, and then we'll crack on with the build. Right, so that's everything all rebuilt on the front end of the car. So you can see we've got all the stainless hardware on now, and I've checked the setup sheet and made all the necessary changes to the front end now. So we'll get bolting these up to the Willspeed chassis. So that's got the steering rack shimmed, and so there's a little bit of float up and down on the bearings, which is what you want. Don't want it too tight. So just putting on the upper brace here, like so. So we'll wind that down, and then we'll let's just nip that up, and then we'll just do this one, get the links popped back on, pop these bolts in. These are going into a machine part, so we'll put a tiny little dob of thread lock on that, and then we'll get the bumper on, and that's pretty much the front end done. Okay, so that's the front end all completed and looking pretty smart. I've got a new front wing which I'll cut out and put on the car there, but that's all looking pretty smart. So put the braces on, and so we'll just chuck the servo posts in for now. I'll do the electric install at the end of the video. I'll probably on part 2, to be honest, with how this is going. So we'll set this aside, and then we'll just grab the remainder of the donor car here. So we'll start stripping the gearbox down, get the C&D block off of it, and then obviously get all that rusty hardware off the car, and service the diff, etc. So we'll get stripping this down now, and I'll sort of show you the process of that. So we just unbolted the shocks, and we'll just set those aside with the other ones, and then we'll get those stripped and cleaned and some new O-rings in, etc. So we'll flip the car over, and we'll just basically undo all of these M3 countersunk bolts, and then we'll take the chassis off, set that to one side, because obviously we don't need that with the Willspeed. Then we'll start stripping the gearbox down. That's the back end all stripped apart. So give these a quick clean up. We've got a bit of corrosion on the little threaded parts for the anti-roll bar, so we'll give those a bit of WD and Scotch-Brite pad, clean them up a bit, give the arms a check, obviously make sure everything's free, everything's tight, and then obviously we'll revert to the setup sheet just to make sure we've got the correct settings on with the hub height, the camber link height, etc. We need to take these ball studs out, as these mount on the Willspeed rear shock tower, so we'll take those out and discard this part. If you want to run the rear roll bar, I'll get the rear bulkhead part from the Cal 3.1 onwards, as it hasn't got this brace here, so we'll get one of those on order. So we can run a roll bar on the back, and then we've got the C&D blocks there. Again, we'll check the pill settings it's got in it with the setup sheet, and then we'll get these just cleaned up and bolted onto the chassis. So we've got the correct pills put in the C block. I'm going to be fitting take one Willspeed D block. So this just fits on the back here as per normal, but this has got slightly different geometry from the standard one, so that you can run 0 degree toe. So that means the hinge pins will be at 0 degrees rather than being angled, which would run outdoors. So that basically means more corner speed, etc., which is what we want on the carpet. So with the C and D block, I use the steel bolts there rather than the stainless options, as these are a bit stronger, and these are obviously going metal to metal, so I use a little dab of thread lock on there and obviously bolt that up. So we'll get that done now. That's the back end all now, so we put some more stainless hardware on, giving this all a check over, and everything's all present and correct. And then we've got the Willspeed mounted up there, as well as the steel bolts in there. So now we'll pay our attention to the gearbox. So we'll get this stripped down and then get it into the lovely Willspeed gearbox. So I'll strip the Willspeed box down, show the insides of that, and then we'll start moving everything over. And again, we'll refer to our setup sheet here. So we're going to run 2 gear and 15k diff oil. So we'll get that done as well. So that's the gearboxes apart. And as you can see, look at that gorgeous Willspeed gearbox there. And this has machined idler gears, so they're so smooth and free running. So that's all good stuff. So then we've got the Yokomo stock gearbox stripped down. So we're going to need the gear diff out of this. So like I said, we'll put 15k 2 gear in that. We won't obviously need all of these parts. So we'll put those to one side, and we're going to need the lay shaft and the bearings, and obviously the slipper assembly as well. So we'll get those items put into the gearbox, and then I'll show it all built up. So we've got the diff apart now. As you can see, the oil is pretty black and disgusting. So we'll get this stripped apart, cleaned out with some brake cleaner and tissue there, and then we'll get some fresh oil in. And as per the setup sheet, we're just going to run 2 of the bevel gears in the diff there. Reason for this, it sort of allows a bit faster rotation on the car, and it gives a bit more oil volume in there as well. So we'll get those stripped out, cleaned up, and some fresh oil in there in a mo. So that's the old diff all out, and the diff all cleaned up with some brake cleaner and tissue. So we're just putting some 15k diff oil in here. We'll just let this settle, and then we'll get it all bolted up and into the box. So let's put it all back together now. So we've got all our gears in there, everything's all running smoothly. Got the Yokomo diff bearings there, and then obviously we use the 2 bearings from the Yokomo gearbox there and the complete slipper assembly, and then the Willspeed uses these smaller bearings in the idler gear there. So we'll get this a bit tricky doing it one-handed, but anyhow, we'll get this all slipped on like so, and then we'll just seat those. There we go. So then you can see how free that is already, and I haven't even nipped anything up. So yeah, we'll get these get that all bolted up, and then get it into the chassis. So now the gearbox is complete, we'll start building up the rear tower. So this is the lower part of the 2-piece tower on the RF2 Willspeed. So that simply slides over there. It's got 4 fixings, so we've got 1 either side here and then 2 at the top. What I'd like to do is to do these top 2 first, then it snugs down, and then do the 2 side ones. And then with the 1 piece, this is the, like I mentioned previously, this is the slightly lower B6 1-piece shock tower, which bolts onto all of the RF2 platform. So then that simply bolts onto there, and then our gearbox is ready to go in the car. So the gearbox is ready to go into the car now. You have to just take the ball studs from the Yokomo and put that into the Willspeed tower like so. What I like to do is to run these low profile M3 lock nuts on there. They've got an eye lock in so they won't rattle loose, and then we've got that on the kind of long setting in the middle, and then the shock tower itself, we've got that on the middle position. So now we'll get this bolted into the car, and as per normal, we'll run, because we're going sort of into a machined surface on the bottom of the car, we'll run the steel hardware and get that bolted in, which we'll do just now. So there we have it. That's the gearbox all bolted up. And yeah, car's looking great. So to mount that rear roll bar, what we're going to do is just modify this piece slightly. So we don't need this brace anymore, so I'm going to cut that down and then trim it out with a Dremel, and put a couple of spacers in here just to fill that gap and make it look a bit neater. And then we'll get the rear roll bar mounted up to the back of the car, which simply just, that plastic part will just bolt on the back like so. and it looked like obviously a lot neater without that brace dangling up in the air there, as you can see. So we'll crack on and get that done now, and then we'll set the car aside and yeah, then get on with the shocks. But you can see how free that is. So you know, even for stock racing in the States, you know, quite a few people guys run the Willspeed and obviously concerned about transmission friction and whatever, but you know, it's super free with those you know, machined idlers in it and whatever. It's probably freer than a stock box anyway. So there we go. So that is progress so far. So off camera I got the trusty Dremel out and cut that brace off, as you can see. So that all looks quite nice, and just to sort of cover up where the cut marks are, just a bit GT85 on that and a brush just to clean it out, makes it look a bit darker. So yeah, I've just found some aluminium spacers there. Excuse the fingernail, I hit it with a hammer a while ago. But yeah, anyway, we've yeah, put some alley spacers in there just to neaten up the look of it. So we'll get that bolted onto the back of the car now, and the roll bar mounted up. That's the rear roll bar mounted up, so that all looks pretty smart now. So yeah, that's pretty much the car kind of 90% done from a rolling chassis perspective. So we'll pop that to one side, and then we'll focus our attention on getting these shocks serviced. So we'll get these stripped down, cleaned, new O-rings in the bottom with some associated green slime, and then checking the setup sheet there. We're going to run 1.6 2-hole pistons in the front, 1.7 2-hole in the rear, with 35 weight all round. I'll be running the Willspeed springs on that, so I'll double check some weights of them, get some advice from the team, and then we'll get the Willspeed springs on there, and then get them bolted back on the car. So I'll do that all off camera. I might show you a bit of the shocks while they're apart anyway, for those who haven't sort of seen inside these Yokomo shocks before. So we'll get on with that now. So we've got those shocks stripped apart, the body's needed clean. I've just put new O-rings in the bottom there. And yeah, so on the looking at the setup sheet here, so on the front we're running, he's running X-ray springs, but 35 weight oil, 1.6 pistons, and then we've got 1mm internal limiter, which is here inside the shock itself, so that's good. We've got one of those. And then again, looking at the setup sheet, he's got 2mm as a kind of bump stop on the shock shaft itself. So we'll find a couple of those in my box, and then we'll get the calipers and then measure the shock stroke length at 21mm, and then the front shocks will be completed. Obviously pay attention to the length of eyelet the guys run as well, so short on the rear and the longer one on the front. So that's the front shocks all serviced. So oh yeah, one thing to say, if you haven't got any shock pliers, definitely grab some. These are ones from Core RC from Schumacher, but these are aluminium pliers, and you've got obviously different sizes on there. And you basically grab your shock shaft, and you can wind the end in there without damaging the shock shaft, which is good. So yeah, we set these to 21mm as per the spreadsheet, and as a bump stop, I've just used an old X-ring there. So we'll give that a whiz. Just got to clean the shock bodies up and fill them up with some 35 weight oil, which I'll get on with now. So I've just filled the shocks and pumped the piston up and down a few times, and as you can see, we've got the air bubbles rising up out the fluid. So that's just obviously air that's below the piston at the bottom of the stroke. So we'll let all the air come out, then we'll pop a bit of oil in the cap, and then we'll bleed the shocks up. But I'll try and show you how I do that. A bit tricky one-handed when I'm filming on the phone, but anyway, we'll give it a go. Right, so I've filled the shock cap up with a little bit of fluid, and obviously the shock's full. So what we'll do now is we'll just bleed the shocks up, and this is how I've seen quite a few of the pro guys do it as well. Obviously I'm no pro, just a bit of a clubman racer, but been doing this a long time. So we'll just let the air out of that. Let's give it a quick wipe. Right, so what we'll do is just gently push the shock shaft up, and then you can see a bit of fluid going to come out the top. So we'll just do that nice and slowly. Right, there we go. So then we'll pop the bleeder screw back in. Just nip that up. Obviously you're going into plastic with those, so again we'll give that a quick wipe. Right, and then we'll put it down to the bottom of the thing. Bottom of the stroke of the piston. So we'll just pump that up and down a few times, and after about sort of 10 pumps you can kind of feel the pressure build up in the shock, and it's still nice and smooth, and there's no you know, you can't sort of feel any restrictions there. So what we'll do now is we'll grab our piece of tissue again. We'll just take the bleeder screw out, So this is a sort of double bleed kind of method that I've seen like Tebow and you know, Mayfield and Dustin Evans and those guys use. So we'll bleed it up again, and we should get a bit more oil out this time. There we go. So I don't know if you can see that on camera. So there we go, you can see a bit of aerated oil there. So we'll give that a wipe. And what we're aiming for is basically a shock with 0 rebound. So we'll just pop that bleeder screw back in, give the shock a pump a couple of times. Oh, it's still a little bit there, as you can see. Oh no, it's kind of gone away. But there you go. So that's there's still a tiny little bit of oil in there. So I think we'll just bleed that one off again, just to be doubly sure. And then we just want the shock to be kind of dead. So we'll just bleed that out again and get a bit of tissue there. There you go. A little bit more of extra oil's come out this time. Right, so then we'll whack that back in, like so. Right, then there you go. We've got a nice, it's not rebounding anymore now. So that's basically what you want to aim for with your shock rebuild. So I'll just give this a quick spray off with some brake cleaner, as like so. And then we'll get my brush and then just brush between the threads, and then that gets all the muck off of the shock. Clean off the oil from the shock cap. There we go, and that is one shock done. So we'll grab our red Willspeed springs, pop these on, and then get the rest done. So there we have our freshly rebuilt set of shocks ready to go back on the car. So spring wise, I've gone for reds all round. Sometimes I run orange on the rear, but I mainly use reds on the front, to be honest. They work okay for me at my local club, which is 1066 Racing down in Hastings in Kent. So see, that's always red all round. Red orange is a good start. Obviously over the winter, some of the Willspeed team have been out testing, and there'll be various setups coming out from those guys soon. So just keep an eye on the springs as to what the guys run. And you can run these springs on the 13mm shocks I've seen on the associated guys. What they tend to do is just flip the adjuster nut over and just run a 12mm spring cup. It's not ideal, but obviously you've got a good range of springs, and they're very reasonably priced at £6 a pair. So so there we go. So we'll get these bolted on the car. So there we go, that's the shocks all bolted on. I've just one thing I've done different from standard, I've just used the flanged nut there. Nothing wrong with the stock Yokomo nuts, but just looks a bit nice, and there's less threads sticking out the end there. Just be careful, some clubs want you to run shock tower protectors, so just be careful of obviously threads sticking out, ripping the carpet, etc. Just be a bit careful, and obviously speak to your local club about that. But lots of places sell shock protectors for the Yokomo. I know the guys over at SEMCS, Slow Electric Model Car Spares, they do a 3D printed part that goes over the shock tower there, and some people do little covers that go over the top. You can make something out of Lexan by simply just bending something over the front like so. But there we go. So that's the car pretty much all ready to go. Then obviously next step will be getting the electrics installed, cutting a rear wing out for it, cutting a front wing out for it, and then we'll do our final checks, which will be setting the toe and the camber as well. So there we have it. So that concludes part 1. Thanks a lot for watching. Hope you've enjoyed this part of the build, and check back for part 2 shortly.